Welcome to REBOL Programming Language. This presentation will help to explain how REBOL programming can revolutionize the way programmers think about programming. REBOL was first created by Carl Sassenrath in 1997. One of Sassenrath's main motivations in creating REBOL was to rebel against software size and complexity. This dream of his gave REBOL its name and form. REBOL is incredibly small. Its uncompressed file is less than 1 megabyte, and depending on the operating system, roughly only about 0.5 megabyte in size. Installation takes less than a minute. As compared to other programming languages, REBOL is nearly syntax-free. While order or context is important, the minimal syntax helps it to be very lightweight because it takes less processing power and time to parse. It requires less bandwidth to transfer data, and it doesn't need as much storage space. REBOL includes all of its libraries and data types already built in. There's no need for your program to add extra libraries in its header or to include extra libraries in its header. Its natural .r extension is already an executable file. Now, the compatibility aspect is italicized because I do think it was one of its downfalls, but I'll get to that later. For now, we'll just acknowledge its ability to run on 17 different operating systems and 30 different platforms as revolutionary and unique. Now, understanding the type of programming language REBOL is will help in better understanding its applications. REBOL is an interpreted programming language, which we are all familiar with, but it is a certain type of interpreted language, a scripting language. It is also an incredibly dynamic language. Scripted programming languages act as the connective tissue or glue code between different parts of a software system and even different software systems altogether. For example, they can apply the output of one program to the input of another with ease. Scripted programming languages are ideal for automated tasks and system administration, like file transfer, sending automated emails, and task scheduling. They are also ideal for manipulating and adding dynamic features to web pages, like filling in forms, automatically clicking buttons, internet searching, and web page retrieval. Now, as a dynamic programming language, we know things like variables and list sizes can change during runtime, but REBOL takes being dynamic to the next level. There are no keywords in REBOL. Every word or value can be overwritten at some point or given multiple meaning depending on its context. One way this is done is encapsulation of code in an object. More than one object can be created with an attribute of the same name, but depending on which object it shows up with or its context, it will determine its meaning. Now let's get into some programming basics. In this section, we will examine REBOL's syntax and take a look at some programming examples. Starting with the universal hello world. As you can see, no extra syntax is needed to end lines. The REBOL header here is actually not necessary if you are coding in REBOL's native console. But once REBOL is installed on your computer, it does allow you to use any text editor or program editor to create your program, so long as you use this header, REBOL followed by the open and close bracket, and save it as a .r file. It's also good to note here that REBOL is not case sensitive. I kept my casing uniform throughout this presentation for aesthetic purposes only. Any casing of this REBOL header or any casing of its built-in functions will have the same effect. REBOL has nearly all of the basic capabilities we know and love. To assign a variable, the colon is used instead of the equal sign, with the variable on the left and its assignment on the right. REBOL includes, in my opinion, a much more advanced version of lists known as series. Series and all of its native functions can be applied to a multitude of data types, not just strings and integers, but also files, email accounts, data in network ports, and more. REBOL has built-in functions and facilitates user-defined functions like normal. The most used syntax in REBOL are the square brackets, which create blocks. Blocks are unique in that they can be read as both code and data, which we will talk more about later. REBOL supports concatenation, Boolean data types and evaluation, conditional if-then and if-else statements, and loops. In this programming example, you can see a function followed by a function. So a function is passed like an argument to another function. Note that the Boolean data type not only works with integers, but also money, time, date, tuples, and char data types. By now, you might have started to notice something unique about the available data types in REBOL, which we will get to shortly. In the loop example, you can see the flexibility in word usage. Whether you use I or any other word, REBOL knows you are talking about the items in the list. Here we have another example of word flexibility and reuse, with object encapsulation as previously mentioned. The variable name balance and the function name bank is assigned to two different objects, and depending on its context, REBOL knows exactly what you are referring to. REBOL also really allows you to traverse multiple fields of data with ease. Here is one example utilizing the loop function for each. The quotations indicate a different field of an entry. You can also think of it as a two-dimensional array. Each person and their corresponding information is a row. Each data field is a column. The empty quotes, where a field is empty, are necessary to set up this two-dimensional array and be able to call or access the appropriate entry. They act as a placeholder to maintain the form of the series, which is specified in brackets following the for each function. Each entry includes 3 fields in a row: name, address, and phone. GUIs, or graphical user interfaces, are also incredibly quick and easy to create in REBOL, which we'll get more into later. For now, just note this simple code creates the following widget, button, and text field. Functions are a bit unique in REBOL because user-defined functions run and look just like built-in native functions once they are created. Here are 2 examples, the left without a return value and the right with a return value. Now for what really makes REBOL so unique and innovative. First, it is a meta-programming language. Second, it has 40 different built-in data types. Third, dialects. Dialects are like domain-specific and content-specific variations of the language. REBOL comes with a multitude of useful dialects already built in, like the GUI dialect previously mentioned. It also comes with a unique capability for the programmer to create their own dialects perfectly tailored to their needs. Last, which we won't discuss further than mentioning it here, you might have noticed already, the language is designed to flow and feel more like spoken language and less like code. Now, metaprogramming refers to a language's capability to treat code as data and data as code. In other words, code and data are completely interchangeable. This allows REBOL to be a data exchange language that can facilitate how applications interpret each other's data while maintaining the context and integrity of that information during the transfer. To do this, REBOL provides consistent computation, storage, and exchange of information. This is one of the reasons functions are consistently applied to many of REBOL's different data types. The result, REBOL applications and programs are completely portable between all platforms without any code modification. Now let's get into REBOL's 40 different data types. Programming is essentially designed to mirror real-world situations and have real-world application. So when including data types like the date, money, time, email address, IP address, and coordinate pairs is incredibly useful. And this practice should really be adopted by more programming languages. These are really common types of data that we see every day in the everyday world. And REBOL automatically recognizes all of its data types and innately knows to apply the appropriate and correct calculations on them to obtain the desired result. Now, whether it's REBOL's built-in dialects or programmer-defined and created dialects, it's really this feature of dialects that makes REBOL so unique. It's instrumental in simplifying creation and maintenance of your programs. Built-in dialects make use of native functions. The graphical user interface dialect makes use of the layout function. The data exchange dialect makes use of the load function. Do dialect, the do function. Parse, the parse function, and so on. These are just a few examples. Next, we have another example of the graphical user interface dialect and layout function. It just shows how you can easily create widgets, buttons, and fields on a screen that the user can interact with. But let's move on to programmer-defined dialects. REBOL's parse function is the magic behind the programmer's ability to design their own dialect. The parse function is designed for pattern matching. So this is how it applies the grammar constructs of the language you created to the code you will write. It's kind of like creating your own mini language. In this way, it's instrumental in reducing code complexity and size. You know exactly what you are trying to achieve with your code, and therefore you can cut through unnecessary syntax or keywords of other languages and get right to the task at hand. All of these user-defined dialects will automatically include REBOL's common set of data types, attributes, structures, symbols, and native capabilities unless you override them. And there's no limit to the number of dialects you create or you use in your program. Here we have an example of a programmer-defined dialect called stock. Its grammar is specified in the second code block. Set is used to signify a grammar rule you are creating. Action is an already built-in function. Words preceded by a single quote are known as literal words, and they must appear in your code exactly as specified in your grammar construct. Note that literal words do have the feature of being made optional with the keyword opt included. The broken line indicates that your trade will choose either the action to sell or to buy, or it will evaluate to false. The exclamation point sets the data type to the specified field. So in this example, the variable shares is an integer data type, the variable company is set to a string data type, and the variable price is set to the money data type. It cannot be overlooked that REBOL has an extensive set of built-in features and functions for internet protocols, sending data across networks, and traversing the web. As stated by programmer Michael Swain, want to grab a page off the web and email its contents to several friends? That takes just a couple of lines of code in REBOL. REBOL also comes with persistent data features that allow you to read, write, store, load, sort, compare, and combine data without the need for outside database systems or any use of SQL. These functions allow you to access data from sources like servers, clipboards, and network connections with ease. Finally, REBOL comes built in with a significant amount of informative and introspective features, like the help, what, and source functions. For example, the what function lists all available functions. In conclusion, there are many things to learn from REBOL. In some instances, REBOL has shown what not to do. REBOL was originally proprietary and closed source. In my opinion, this is the initial reason REBOL did not hit the ground running and was never fully popularized. Its ideal goal to be compatible across many different operating systems and platforms was another of its pitfalls. That kind of upkeep just requires too much overhead time and maintenance. Operating systems are constantly being improved and upgraded, which would mean REBOL would have to keep up with every one of those updates. On the REBOL website, you can see that the system compatibility re-releases shrunk and slowed over time until they came to a complete halt. In other cases, REBOL has outlined a model that future programming languages can strive for. More data types is a must. Built-in and recognized data types like money, time, temperature, and so on should definitely be adapted by current and any future programming languages. I also believe the ability to create your own dialects can really bring some life and spark back into the programming and computer science community. It facilitates a way for the average programmer to be more involved in the way programming languages are created, and paves the way for exploration and creativity, two of the most key ingredients to greatness. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I hope you have a wonderful day.